We want to turn now to the latest in the race for the White House. In Washington state, former Vice President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders are virtually tied right now after last night's primary. The latest results show Sanders with 32.7% of the votes, Biden close behind with 32.5%. 89 pledged delegates are at stake in Washington state. It was the second largest haul from yesterday's Big Tuesday. It's expected to take days to receive and tally all of those votes, though. The current results are standing in stark contrast to the 2016 Democratic caucus in Washington, where Bernie Sanders walked away with more than 70% of the vote. So joining us live via Skype this morning to discuss yesterday's results is Ben Gaskins, an assistant professor of political science at Lewis and Clark. Ben, good morning.
Good morning.
So what do you think? What was to blame here for such a steep drop-off in voters and support for Bernie compared to what we saw in 2016?
Well, Bernie Sanders has traditionally done much better in the caucuses than in the primaries, simply because his supporters are so much more enthusiastic than the other candidates. And so for these smaller gatherings, these caucuses, they're more likely to show up and show their support for him. At these bigger primaries where the electorate is much broader and larger, well, that gives the other candidates a much much better hope of doing well against him. And that's what we saw last night, where they're basically neck and neck. And if the exit polls are to be believed, Joe Biden may actually come out ahead narrowly in Washington.
So, Ben, let's give people just a little refresher for anyone who doesn't remember for the Democratic Party here in Washington state. Washington state has essentially gone from more of that caucus setup to this closed primary system. And you think that played quite a role here?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's not the only thing that's going on, but Bernie Sanders supporters may not be as numerous as the more moderate and conservative parts of the party, but they are very enthusiastic and are able to turn out. And those caucuses really tend to advantage the candidates that can turn out their core supporters who are willing to give up hours of their day to support their candidate. And primaries require less effort and less time, and so it tends to get a much larger turnout and a much broader turnout as well.
Now, yesterday's voting, we saw Michigan, Washington, both big hauls. Several states, though, were voting. So does this latest round here solidify Biden in the party's nominee status? Has he reached that front-runner status yet? Is there still a path forward for Bernie at this point? He's showing no signs of dropping out.
Oh, absolutely. I think Joe Biden is clearly the front runner at this point. I think Bernie Sanders was really counting on a comeback last night, either in Michigan and Washington. But the fact that the only state that he has been able to win is North Dakota really shows that his path to the nomination is pretty hard at this point. He's not turning out the numbers and the margins that he was able to 4 years ago in a losing effort, and the map doesn't get any better for him in the near future. And so while Bernie Sanders may stay in the race for the time being, hope for a good performance in the debate on Sunday, it's really hard to see how he is able to get the nomination unless Joe Biden just absolutely collapses.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things pare down here between now and the convention. Ben Gaskins, assistant professor of political science at Lewis and Clark. Thank you so much.
Thank you.